Germany in the 1930s, the former Soviet Union, and other authoritarian dictatorial regimes. Kelly Hyman. Very simple story to follow. 5 chapters. How persuasive do you think this will be to a jury?
Well, first we have to look at it from the standpoint that he was indicted. That means that the evidence presented to the grand jury believed that he should be charged with a serious crime. These are serious crimes, and it shows that people need to be held accountable for their actions, and that no one, no matter who you are in the United States, is above the law. Having said that, in the court of law, you are innocent until proven guilty. So he has not been convicted of these crimes. But based on the evidence presented to them, ultimately it'll be up to the jury to make a determination on whether they think that he should be convicted of these serious crimes.
It's right, that, isn't it, Miles? This is very different to the other 2 indictments that we've seen, the hush money payment case, the case of the classified documents, because this relates specifically to his time in office. And it goes to the very heart of how the US Constitution works, the way the votes are cast, the way they're counted. It doesn't get more fundamental than that.
It doesn't get more fundamental, Christian, and in keeping with that, compared to the other indictments, this one is so much more robust in that you have people who are witnesses to this from the highest levels of the federal government all the way down to security officers who were trying to safeguard the United States Capitol. I mean, it really is incredibly comprehensive. And when you read it, you find out that Donald Trump very clearly knew his claims were false. His vice president of the United States said it. His attorney general said it. His lawyers said it. The top of election officials across the country he was talking to in states said it. It really is pretty breathtaking to read this in scope. And, you know, it is important that Jack Smith said defendants are innocent until proven guilty, but it's really tough to read this indictment and not see how the prosecutor would win this case against Donald Trump. It's very, very compelling. It's an avalanche of evidence.
Jennifer, I'm going to pick out bits of the indictment as we go along tonight, but there's one specific part of it, page 14, section 28, which refers to what Miles has just been talking. So an official who we think to be Mark Meadows, he's then Chief of Staff, goes down to Georgia, this is December the 23rd, to look at the Cobb County vote on behalf of the president to see whether things are being done properly. And he comes back and he notifies Trump that state officials were conducting themselves in an exemplary fashion. And he tells the president that if there is any fraud in the vote, they are going to find it. And that very same day, Donald Trump tweets that the officials in Cobb County are terrible people. That is very revealing, isn't it?
All depends on the perspective of where you're coming from. Keep in mind in the context, because most people want to get into the mind of Donald Trump to say, this is how he felt, this is what he knew, and this is what he was thinking. When James Comey came out with the information about Hillary Clinton, and he said she didn't intend to. Well, he didn't speak to her of her intent. So now we're getting into Donald Trump's mind, whether he intended to say the things that he did in a malicious way and knowing that the information was false. So we're not the jury hearing all of the evidence and information. So I caution, as we're outside looking in, it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback, but what Donald Trump went through for the 4 years he was in office, constantly having a barrage of information being leaked out that things that he was doing that he knew he was not doing, like the Russia collusion. And 6 years down the line, we found out that that information was totally fabricated. And so therefore, if internally he's feeling that the organization and the system is against me, and here's another evidence that it's against me, in his mind, we can't say if he knew or felt that this information was false.
Well, Donald Trump has already been charged in 2 other unrelated cases. He's due to face trial in New York next March over crimes he's alleged to have committed in relation to payments to the former adult film star Stormy Daniels. In May, he's set to stand trial in Florida over claims he unlawfully held on to military and other classified documents. Kelly Hyman, I get the sense from the prosecutor that he wants to act with speed here. Do you get a sense that as soon as this arraignment is done tomorrow, he will take precedence. This case will take precedence because people need to know the outcome of this case before they can vote.
I think that's key. There was a recent study poll that was done, and based on the poll results, no matter if you were Republican, Democrat, Independent, that the people agreed that the trial should go before the election. Having said that, I would guess most likely that Donald Trump lawyers would like the trials to go after the election. I think that's going to be key, and I think we're going to see how that plays out in court, and that Donald Trump's attorneys file motions to continue the trial or extend it past the 2024 election.
Do you think, Miles, that the reason he's not indicted the co-conspirators, there are 6 of them in the indictment, says that he wants to focus public attention on Donald Trump himself? The 4 counts relate to Donald Trump. This case is about Donald Trump. Why do you think he's not indicted the other 6?
Yeah, well, I mean, Jack Smith made clear that the investigations are ongoing. So I would expect more indictments. But I also think the reason for getting this one out against one defendant is to do exactly what he said in the press conference, is enable a speedy trial. So they're trying to get this one defendant, the most important defendant in this case, in the courtroom as fast as humanly possible. I would be very surprised if some of these other unindicted co-conspirators are not indicted. They clearly engaged in criminal behavior. So I would expect that to come in the not too distant future. But, the other thing I want to push back against what one of my other panelists said about not being in Donald Trump's head and that we're on the outside. I was on the inside, and this stretches back several years. When I was in the Trump administration in meetings with the president in the Oval Office and Air Force One, he talked about how he wanted to use the Insurrection Act to enable him to have more power. And we see top advisors around him before January 6th, lawyers musing about using the Insurrection Act. This is not something that was spur of the moment. Donald Trump spent many years laying the groundwork for this, asked aides about it, and I can testify to that in person and firsthand, that this was the type of thing he was conceiving of many years before the event.
That is the point that Jack Smith comes to on page 2 of the indictment, Jennifer, that he knows there is going to be a First Amendment defence to this, that the president was expressing his right to speak freely, even to lie about the election. But that doesn't entitle him, Jack Smith says, to conspire with others to defraud the country of its election, to deny the votes that were cast. Do you think a First Amendment defence is going to stand up under that sort of scrutiny?
Well, that's why he will be, if it goes that route, for a jury to hear evidence on both sides. Because hearsay is one thing, but when evidence is presented, it's another. And one of the things in our Constitution that gives us the ultimate right is our First Amendment. And that's for free speech, whether we like what we hear or we don't like what we hear. Now, the other part of free speech is that you cannot use free speech to make people do something or encourage them to do something that's going to either be their safety and security or other safety and security. One of the things that appears in Jack Smith's indictment is that he doesn't claim what Donald Trump stated, to go to the Capitol peacefully. Why was that information excluded from his presentation that he gave for the charges? If you're going to bring charges against someone, you need to give the positive and the minus, as well as what may be exculpatory evidence, so that the defendant could defend themselves. I understand that people have strong feelings about Donald Trump and they would love to see him incarcerated, but I'm a person that believes in our Constitution. I believe in our judicial system, and everyone has an opportunity to have their day in court and present evidence so that the jury can make the decision based on the facts.
So this is not, Jennifer, like Nazi Germany or an autocratic state, Russia, others around the world. This is the legal process unfolding as it should.
Correct.
Okay. Kelly, I just want to, before we go to a short break, I just want to talk about what we did learn last night, which we didn't hear from the January 6th committee, largely because he didn't give any evidence, and that is that the Vice President, Mike Pence, had kept a contemporaneous note or notes while all this was unfolding around January the 6th. How important is that in a court case? I mean, can it be brought into a case, and how do juries view that?
No, absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see if, in fact, that he's called to testify at the trial. I'm guessing that former Vice President Pence will be called to testify because his notes were in some ways a roadmap that helped lay out this indictment. And I think that's going to be very key for the jury to hear this, not only just from the notes itself, but from him personally as well.
Around the world and across the UK, you are watching BBC News.